In Episode 11, taking advantage of the destruction of the Heavenly Ghost Sect, Han Li destroyed the two communication formations connecting to the Immortal Realm belonging to Jingyuan Temple and the Heavenly Ghost Sect. Afterward, he left Jingyuan Temple and restored freedom to Hapsan Simying. Sima Jingming learned that Lu Yuer had been taken away by a true immortal of the same clan. Han Li then continued to travel throughout the Spirit Ring realm to gather materials, slew the 5-clawed Flood Dragon, and at the Firecloud Mountain Range refined the 8-treasure exquisite bone armor and the heaven-breaking fist armor, preparing to illegally enter the Immortal Realm. Everyone, please look forward to the developments of the next episode. Deep within the vortex of black clouds, a strange gray-white wall of light, no more than 10 jang in size, appeared faintly before the eyes of the golden-haired giant ape, blue light flickering across it. He clenched both fists, and 2 silver beams of light as massive as mountains suddenly appeared, blazing brightly as they formed a pair of ferocious fist armors. White bone spikes wrapped around his fists. With a thunderous roar, the giant ape's entire body released a faint golden glow, and his magical power surged along his arms and poured into the silver fist armor. The fist armor immediately emitted dazzling silver light and expanded to twice its original size. At the same time, the 7 blue points of light on Han Li's chest and abdomen suddenly shone brightly. The muscles across his body swelled once more, and his arms grew even larger. He abruptly swung his arm and punched toward the gray-white wall of light. A mass of silver light shot out from the tip of his fist and rapidly expanded in midair, transforming into a silver flood dragon phantom as large as a room, which plunged directly into the depths of the vortex. A tremendous boom resounded as the entire sky shook violently. Deep within the vortex, the gray-white wall of light emitted waves of light like shattered glass, and dense spiderweb-like cracks spread across its entire surface. Even so, the wall of light did not collapse. Instead, the silver point of light within was violently shaken and burst apart with a loud crash. The previously calm black clouds suddenly began to churn madly, and countless spatial rifts gradually widened, converging toward the golden-haired giant ape. Seeing this, the giant ape transformed by Han Li immediately executed a movement technique in midair. After a few flickers, he appeared ghost-like right in front of the gray-white wall of light. Once again, his full-body magical power erupted, flowing along his arms as his golden fur suddenly formed golden scales and his muscles rapidly doubled in size. The 7 mystic apertures on his chest radiated brilliant light, and the heaven-breaking fist armor on his hands shone even more intensely. A silver flood dragon phantom gradually emerged, accompanied by low dragon roars. The golden-haired giant ape shouted like thunder, "Break!" A white fist smashed into the wall of light. A massive crash echoed. On the giant ape's right fist armor, the white-silver bone spikes shattered into pieces, and the flood dragon phantom and the fist armor exploded at the same time. The silver ring of light in the sky suddenly flared, releasing 10,000 dazzling rays so bright that one could not look directly at them, then spread out and enveloped the gray-white wall of light entirely within. Immediately after, a crisp clang, like the sound of porcelain shattering, rang out. The gray-white wall of light instantly broke apart, forming a gap over 1 jang tall, revealing a dark and hazy expanse of space behind it. At the same time, an extremely violent spatial fluctuation that Han Li had never felt before surged out from within the gap. His eyes flickered rapidly as golden light flashed over his body. He immediately reverted to human form and plunged into the gap. As soon as he passed through, more than 10 spatial rifts and the black clouds behind him swallowed up the gray-white wall of light. After a while, the radiance on the silver pillar of light receded and gradually dimmed. In the sky, the vortex also slowly dissipated, and the spatial rifts within it were filled in. Snow once again fell across the mountain peak, and aside from the howling wind, everything returned to peace. Within his field of vision, all kinds of differently colored lights flashed and shot about wildly, churning in complete disorder. Large swaths of light converged together, sweeping in from all directions and colliding with deafening explosions. From time to time, pillars of vapor erupted from spatial rifts, with light also emerging from within them. An astonishing suction force came from the cracks, accompanied by woo-woo sounds. Even a great ascension cultivator or certain high-level demonic beasts with indestructible bodies, if they were even slightly careless here, would have their souls utterly annihilated without even a chance to reincarnate. This place was the space between the two realms. At this moment, Han Li was like a person who could not swim, thrown into a strange sea filled with countless towering waves. Although he had anticipated the danger of the interrealm space, he had not expected it to be so perilous. Spatial tempests filled the surroundings, far stronger than the spatial storms he had encountered when ascending from the human realm to the spirit realm. If he had not cultivated the true extreme body, swallowed countless spiritual materials, and practiced many body-refining techniques, he would likely have been ground into powder the instant he entered this place. His entire body was covered by an ancient-style white bone armor, the treasure that had gathered the greatest number of rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures in the Spirit Ring realm. Relying on the 8-treasure exquisite bone armor, his body still wavered unsteadily amid the gravitational pull of the spatial rifts. He took a deep breath, and the bone armor emitted dazzling white light. Above the mass of white light, a hanging drape and a shield formed. All the patterns on the treasure armor shone brightly, releasing sharp, piercing sounds. The drape and shield created by the armor spun around Han Li. After circling rapidly once, they suddenly merged into one, transforming into a solid-like protective layer that enveloped his body. The protective barrier radiated dazzling white light, seemingly isolating the surrounding spatial vibrations. Only then did Han Li's figure stabilize. He looked at the armor and nodded lightly twice. When he had refined the 8-treasure exquisite bone armor, it was precisely to deal with the spatial tempests within the inter-realm space, so the materials used all possessed certain spatial attributes. Today, it indeed did not disappoint him. Blue light flickered a few times in his eyes, and he then urged his escape light forward. Waves of spatial storms pounced from all sides, but they were all blocked by the 8-treasure exquisite bone armor. However, after the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Han Li's brows furrowed once more. Even with the armor protecting him, though he was temporarily safe, his speed through the spatial storms was far too slow. From the beginning until now, he had probably flown only a bit over 100 Li. If it were merely a matter of time, it would not have been a problem. After all, this was a weak spatial junction coordinate, and moving straight ahead slowly, he would eventually enter the Immortal realm. But he could sense that each time the armor blocked a wave of spatial storm, it lost a bit of spiritual power. He had originally wanted to conserve some strength to deal with unexpected situations, but it seemed that would not be possible. Han Li pondered for a moment and muttered a sentence to himself. The next instant, 7-colored radiance spread from his entire body, dazzling like brilliant sunlight. A phoenix cry that rang up to the 9th heaven resounded as he spun once, transforming into a gigantic bird over 10 jang long. It was the heavenly phoenix transformation from the 12 transformations of Jingzhe. The 8-treasure exquisite bone armor automatically disassembled, turning into pieces of bone plates that attached themselves to various parts of the heavenly phoenix's body. The white radiance barrier was unaffected by the transformation. The heavenly phoenix spread its wings, turning into a 7-colored afterimage that shot forward at astonishing speed, several times faster than before. A wave of spatial tempest swept in from the side, but the moment it collided with the heavenly phoenix's body, it was pushed aside by the 7-colored radiance. The storms automatically slid past. The spirit heavenly phoenix possessed an innate talent for controlling spatial power while flying within spatial tempests, truly like a fish in water. A trace of excitement appeared in Han Li's eyes. He let out a long cry and increased his speed once more, piercing straight through countless spatial storms and rapidly flying onward. Time passed, bit by bit. There was no day or night between the two realms, but he had flown for roughly about a day. On this day, he encountered danger many times. Compared to a single day outside, it felt unbearably long. The space between the two realms did not only contain spatial tempests, it also concealed several kinds of sudden dangers. And there were even some strange living beings that dwelled there, launching surprise attacks on him several times. Fortunately, Han Li had the Mingqing spirit eyes to detect them in advance, and together with the Heavenly Phoenix's ability to control spatial power, he was able to pass through with danger but without disaster. At this moment, the 7-colored radiance surrounding the Heavenly Phoenix had faded considerably compared to before, and weariness showed in its eyes. Maintaining the transformation for such a long time consumed no small amount of bodily power. However, what worried Han Li even more was the armor on his body. Cracks had already appeared on the surface of the armor, and the white defensive layer surrounding him had thinned greatly, now less than 1/3 of what it had been when first formed. Had he known this would happen, he would have forced himself to stay a while longer and refined a few more treasures. Han Li let out a bitter laugh in his heart and finally discarded the thought. After all, it was already too late to say anything now. He took a deep breath, and the 7-colored radiance around his body surged once more as he increased his flying speed again. After flying forward not far, his eyes suddenly lit up and he softly exclaimed, "Oh?" Ahead, piercing through the spatial tempests, a trace of white light appeared. Although faint, it was steady. Could it be? Han Li was slightly startled, and a conjecture arose in his heart. He increased his escape speed once more and quickly flew closer. The white points of light grew brighter and brighter as he approached. A lofty and noble aura spread from within, like a sacred land, high above and beyond reach. This kind of aura was something he remembered clearly. It was the aura of the Immortal realm. At last, excitement surged in Han Li's heart, and he let out a long sigh of relief. Although his body was somewhat fatigued, the scene before him still shook his mind. As long as he returned to the immortal realm, he would naturally have ways to find the major organization that had issued the warrant for his arrest, and then trace the origin of why he had lost his memory and suffered severe injuries. After flying forward for a while, Han Li paused slightly, slowing his flight. He saw that not far away, within the chaotic spatial currents, a golden sphere with a diameter of several hundred jang was floating, looking like a gigantic bubble. The surrounding spatial gales struck the bubble and were immediately bounced away, unable to cause any damage. Inside the mysterious bubble, it was not empty vaguely. Something could be seen within. A layer of blue light appeared in Han Li's eyes as he focused his gaze. Very quickly, his expression sank slightly. His minching spirit eyes were actually unable to see through the bubble. There was a strange force inside that blocked his vision. Curiosity rose in Han Li's heart, but he quickly shook his head. This bubble was somewhat eerie. The heavenly phoenix, transformed by Han Li, spread its wings and veered aside, flying past the golden bubble. At this very moment, the surrounding spatial tempest suddenly shook violently. Boom! A massive force surged out from the side and slammed fiercely into the body of the heavenly phoenix. Han Li was shocked. What? This force was enormous, even stronger than one of his full-power attacks. The heavenly phoenix's body was struck and, against its will, slammed into the surface of the bubble. The bubble, which could easily repel spatial tempests, not only failed to bounce him away upon collision, but instead made a soft poochie sound as his body was swallowed inside. Han Li only felt the world spin for a moment. Then he lightly flapped his wings a few times and barely stabilized his body. What he saw when he swept his gaze around startled him greatly. Below was an extremely peaceful golden world. The chaotic spatial currents outside had no effect on this place at all. Space was filled with golden light, and below floated a continent several hundred li wide, like an island. The heaven and earth spiritual chi was extremely dense, more than 100 times richer than even the best spiritual lands of the Spirit Ring realm. On the surface of the continent were lush green forests, and every towering tree appeared to be at least 1,000 years old. Within the forests, there were countless kinds of spiritual materials, all over 1,000 years in age, with many even exceeding 10,000 years. He could hardly recognize any of them across the entire continent. Everything was a treasure. Han Li thought for a moment. The 7-colored radiance on his body flashed, and he returned to human form once more. He flipped his hand and took out a jade green pill, then swallowed it. This pill was called the Heavenly Essence Pill. It was a pill secretly refined by Jingyuan Temple and could absorb part of one's mental energy, providing great benefits to those cultivating the lesser Northern Dipper stellar origin art. The Heavenly Essence Pill turned into a warm stream that flowed through his entire body, quickly dispersing and restoring all the fatigue of his body. Han Li relaxed his expression. He did not rashly descend to the ground, but instead activated his Mingqing spirit eyes and began to survey the surroundings. He felt that the collision just now was somewhat strange, as if someone had deliberately pushed him in. At this moment, deafening roars that shook the heavens and spanned tens of thousands of li came from below, and the entire island rumbled and trembled. A vast expanse of yellow clouds surged up from within the forest, flying toward Han Li at lightning speed. The yellow clouds blinked and arrived before him. Han Li could make out the silhouette of an enormous giant within the yellow clouds. Boom! An enormous fist thrust out from within the clouds. Its surface was covered in withered yellow skin like tree roots, extremely rough. The moment the fist appeared, it carried an indescribably terrifying brute force as it smashed toward Han Li. Before the fist even arrived, ripples already spread through the nearby void. Han Li's pupils shrank. The 7 points of light on his abdomen suddenly flared brilliantly as the Lesser Northern Dipper stellar origin art was activated to the fullest. His entire body became faintly star-like, with 7 thick and brilliant streams of starlight coiling around him as he also threw a punch. After fully mastering the Lesser Northern Dipper stellar origin art, even without transforming, the brute force contained in this punch was comparable to the previous full-power strike of the Yellow Scarf Giant. The two fists collided, producing an earth-shaking explosion. The surrounding void twisted violently, then countless shockwaves erupted outward, instantly forming numerous tornado-like air currents that shot in all directions. Han Li was blasted backward by the tremendous force, flying over 100 jang before barely managing to stop. The giant within the yellow clouds was also forced back 2 steps before stabilizing itself. Immediately afterward, the yellow clouds around the giant were swept away by the violent air currents, revealing its figure. Han Li steadied himself with a flicker. The faint, silver light membrane covering his body flowed slightly, and his form instantly stabilized. The immense power contained in the opponent's punch made him inwardly alarmed, but with the astonishing defensive strength of the true extreme body, that punch could not injure him. He narrowed his eyes and looked downward. Several hundred jang away stood a yellow-skinned giant, 200 to 300 jang tall. Ancient spiritual patterns covered its entire body, and its appearance was extremely ugly. with a flat nose and wide mouth. Most bizarre of all, it had no pair of eyes, but instead a single enormous vertical eye, murky and dark within. Although the giant looked dull and sluggish, Han Li vaguely sensed an immense aura of a true immortal, causing the corners of his eyes to twitch involuntarily. This had nothing to do with the opponent's cultivation depth, but was purely an instinctive perception. When the one-eyed giant saw that Han Li had taken its punch without suffering any injury, it froze in surprise, clearly caught off guard. Then it let out an enraged roar. A swath of yellow light appeared around its body as it charged wildly through the air toward Han Li. Seeing this, Han Li softly chanted an incantation. Golden light rapidly flared over his body, and in a flash he transformed into a golden-haired giant ape over 10 jang tall. The patterns of 7 blue stars appeared on his chest and abdomen, shimmering brilliantly. The starlight merged with the golden glow outside his body, causing the giant ape's physique to swell even further. The golden-haired giant ape clenched his fingers into a massive fist and swung his thick arm, punching toward the charging one-eyed giant. The void ahead twisted violently as a hazy golden fist, projection as large as a mountain, appeared, interwoven with faint starlight, making it exceptionally solid. The giant roared furiously, stepping forward like lightning as it threw a punch to meet the golden fist projection. A thunderous explosion shook heaven and earth. The enormous body of the giant was blasted backward like a meteor falling from the sky, crashing violently into a hill. The entire hill shook violently, collapsing into a huge crater as dust billowed into the sky. The golden-haired giant ape leaped and appeared above the crater. Both of its arms swung as countless overlapping golden fists, shadows vaguely condensed, raining down densely toward the bottom. The one-eyed giant struggled to leap back onto the ground. It appeared uninjured, but its face was filled with rage. It let out a low roar and stomped heavily on the ground. Suddenly, strange golden patterns appeared around its body, emitting a faint golden glow that rapidly spread across the surrounding ground. With a series of cracking sounds, wherever the golden glow spread, the ground shattered into countless grains of shimmering golden sand. As if alive, the yellow crystalline sand surged upward, spiraling around the giant's body. In a short time, a suit of golden sand armor formed around it, an extremely tough yellow crystal sand battle armor. Explosive sounds like torrential rain suddenly rang out. Countless golden fist shadows slammed into the one-eyed giant's body, producing dense flashes of golden light. The crystal sand armor remained completely unharmed, and the giant's body was not touched in the slightest. Seeing this, the golden-haired giant ape was momentarily stunned and hurriedly shot backward. The one-eyed giant coldly stared at the giant ape in midair and stomped heavily on the ground. The golden spiritual patterns around its body flashed, and with a hum, rings of golden ripples spread outward. In a short time, the ripples covered an area of over 10 li. As the giant ape was retreating, it suddenly felt its body sink. The surrounding gravity abruptly increased several-fold, as if an invisible hand were ruthlessly dragging it downward. Unable to remain suspended, it slowly fell. Gravity manipulation, a thought flashed through Han Li's mind. But as soon as the thought arose, the golden-haired giant ape slammed heavily into the ground and continued sinking. In the blink of an eye, both of its legs had sunk several jang into the earth, sending countless fragments of stone flying. The next instant, the one-eyed giant arrived. A massive golden fist, carrying unavoidable, world-shaking momentum, smashed toward the giant ape. The fist generated a violent gale, like a huge silver-white blade dragging through the void. The golden-haired giant ape crossed both arms. In an instant, dense golden scales covered its entire body. A loud boom rang out. The giant ape felt a powerful force transmit through its arms into its entire body. Its body shook violently and was forced more than a jang deeper into the ground. The one-eyed giant's body trembled slightly as its fists blurred, producing countless enormous fist shadows like a storm of wind and rain that pounded toward the giant ape. Pushed into a desperate situation, the giant ape could only continuously wave its arms, exerting all its strength to block. Han Li inwardly cried out in distress. Although his body was currently tough enough to withstand the opponent's attacks, the gravitational pull made it impossible to escape in a short time. His body continued sinking, and by now he was buried up to his waist. If this continued, he feared he would be buried alive. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The void over 100 jang behind the one-eyed giant rippled. A strange beast over 100 jang tall, half man and half horse, silently leaped out. Its entire body was wrapped in a current of green wind, and its body was pitch black. Its lower half was a horse's body without fur, covered instead in dense green scales. Its upper half was the bare torso of a powerfully built man. Most astonishing of all were the 3 identical heads growing from its shoulders. The moment it appeared, while still in midair, one muscular arm lifted. In its hand was a blue lightning spear over 10 jang long, which it hurled toward the one-eyed giant's back. Blue lightning arcs surged wildly over the spear like boiling water. A flash of light streaked through the air as the lightning spear pierced straight toward the giant's back. The one-eyed giant, fully focused on battling the giant ape, sensed the change behind it and attempted to dodge, but it was already too late. It let out a sudden shout as the spiritual patterns around its body flared with golden light. The ground within several LI suddenly shook. The yellow crystal sand on the ground behind it abruptly rose, twisting together to form a brown sand wall as a shield. A soft thud sounded as the blue lightning spear easily pierced through the sand wall and stabbed straight into the one-eyed giant's body. Immediately afterward came a tremendous boom. The light on the blue lightning spear burst forth violently. Countless arcs of lightning shot out and exploded. The one-eyed giant let out an extremely miserable scream. Slightly above its abdomen, a huge hole exploded open, and large amounts of brownish-red blood sprayed everywhere. The half-man, half-horse beast immediately flashed and reappeared, several hundred jang away behind them. All three of its faces showed joy, but they soon frowned. It realized things had not gone as planned. The lightning spear was meant to pierce the giant's heart, but instead struck a position slightly above the abdomen. Even with the explosion, it had failed to kill the opponent. The reason was that at the instant the lightning spear pierced the sand wall, the one-eyed giant had raised the ground several zhang by controlling the crystal sand. Though extremely difficult, it had narrowly avoided a fatal strike. Even so, it had been badly injured. At this moment, blood spilled from the corner of the giant's mouth. Large patches of crystal sand fell from its body, revealing mottled flesh of bizarre shape beneath. When it looked at the eroded sand wall, its face resembled that of an old man who had suffered severe mental trauma after enduring countless hardships. Due to this sudden turn of events, the surrounding gravity abruptly relaxed. The golden-haired giant ape, transformed by Han Li, immediately leaped up, twisting a few times as it flew several hundred jang away. His gaze swept over the half-man, half-horse beast, and his pupils shrank sharply. Judging from the aura emanating from the creature and its special concealment abilities, he guessed that his earlier being pushed into the bubble and falling into this space was very likely connected to it. He did not act rashly, but instead focused his attention on the two monsters before him. At this moment, the half-man, half-horse beast sprang up on its four hooves. The wind around its body surged as its figure suddenly shot toward the giant. Its hands once again condensed a lightning spear, which stabbed toward the giant's back as fast as lightning. A savage look flashed in the giant's eye. It opened its mouth and let out a shout, and brilliant light burst from its face. Countless grains of yellow crystal sand flooded in from all directions and rapidly gathered. As the half-man, half-horse beast drew near, in an instant, the yellow crystal sand transformed into several hundred dull yellow spikes that thrust toward it, accompanied by a fierce whistling sound. The 6 eyes of the half-man, half-horse beast revealed shock. Green light flared around its face. The lightning spear in its hand swept horizontally, and countless arcs of electricity shot out, instantly forming a gigantic net of lightning in front of it. Clang, clang, clang! The yellow spikes struck the blue lightning net without ceasing. Explosions rang out in succession. Driven back by the force, the half-man, half-horse beast was knocked backward again and again, retreating 100 jang at a time. After this exchange, the one-eyed giant could not endure it either. It opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of brownish-red blood. A trace of fury appeared in its eye, and its hatred deepened by several degrees. It warily glanced toward the golden-haired giant ape transformed by Han Li. The giant's enormous body shifted slightly, retreating over 100 jang, forming a three-way standoff with the giant ape and the half-man, half-horse beast. At the hole in its abdomen, an earthen yellow vortex of flowing light slowly appeared, spinning within. The flesh around the wound gradually turned black like rock, emitting a gloomy radiance. Not only that, as the vortex of flowing light continued to rotate, the blackened area of the wound grew larger and larger, like a lake, freezing over, rapidly plugging the hole. Seeing this, golden light flashed over Han Li's body. His figure immediately shrank, returning to human form. With a flip of his wrist, a hazy purple talisman suddenly appeared. It was the Tai Yi transforming azure talisman. As a streak of purple light flashed, his body gradually became indistinct and then vanished on the spot. The one-eyed giant froze slightly at the sight. When the half-man, half-horse beast saw Han Li suddenly disappear, its 6 eyes spun around once, and an unusual glint appeared within them at the same time. Immediately afterward, its gaze shifted to stare directly at the one-eyed giant, flashing with ferocity. The one-eyed giant sensed the beast's hostile stare and ignored Han Li, coldly lowering itself into a half-crouch and taking a defensive stance. The 2 eyes on the middle head of the centaur flickered with lightning. The green scales on its body shone brightly. Strands of blue lightning radiance shot out, swirling around it. With a shhh, a lightning halberd appeared in its hand. Lightning coiled around the halberd as the electric radiance condensed solidly, covered with many strange patterns. At a glance, it looked like a treasure with immense might. As soon as it finished, The centaur's rear hooves stomped hard, and its body shot out like thunder, pouncing straight toward the one-eyed giant's position. The giant let out a low shout and suddenly raised its forefoot, stamping heavily on the ground, making the earth shake at once. Countless clouds of dust mixed with yellow crystal sand surged upward, like a spinning streak of golden light that fell into its hand. The yellow light condensed into a long staff nearly 100 jang in length. The giant gripped the staff tightly. Golden radiance immediately flared along the shaft as it lunged forward to meet the sweeping lightning halberd. In an instant, dense staff shadows covered half the void, completely enclosing the lightning halberd within. Boom, boom, boom! Crashing sounds rang out one after another. The ferocious lightning halberd shattered repeatedly amid the staff shadows, turning into flickering blue lightning that gradually dissipated. Just then, the dense staff shadows, falling like snow, suddenly revealed a tear. A sharp lightning halberd shot out from it, stabbing straight toward the giant's throat. Unexpectedly, the one-eyed giant seemed to have foreseen it long ago. It immediately withdrew its staff, wrapping the staff shadows around its body. The lightning halberd traced an arc through midair, then stabbed back toward the giant once again. At the same time, the centaur's hands formed seals without stopping. Countless lightning halberds, like roaming dragons sweeping the heavens with electricity, pounced toward the giant. Within the vast sea of halberd shadows, countless arcs of electricity leapt continuously, and the air carried a scorching smell. The giant, on one hand, controlled the yellow staff to form indistinct yellow afterimages, like a rock spreading its wings, to block the onrushing blue halberds. For a time, the crack-crack sounds did not cease. Yellow light and blue lightning interwove, locked in a fierce stalemate. From time to time, bursts of thunderous booms came from the air, either yellow light suddenly fractured, or lightning arcs violently exploded. Massive rings of shock waves spread in all directions, twisting and shaking the void. The battle covered an extremely large area. Inside the bubble, it was as if a raging wind swept across everything, and the bubble's surface rippled with violent tremors, as though it could change shape at any moment. Han Li, hidden from view, had long since kept a distance of 700 to 800 jang from those two colossal monsters, watching the fierce battle closely. Originally, he had planned to take advantage of their fight to secretly flee the mysterious bubble, then quickly return to the Immortal realm. However, the moment he witnessed the scene before him, a hint of hesitation appeared. After thinking for a while, Han Li finally decided not to leave in a hurry. Countless thunderous explosions rang out for an unknown length of time. The light and shadows in the sky, which had originally been evenly matched, finally began to show some changes. The one-eyed giant seemed to be affected by its earlier injuries, its stamina gradually failed to keep up, and the speed at which it swung, its staff slowed somewhat. In contrast, the centaur beast fought with increasing ferocity. The blue lightning halberds began to seize the initiative and gradually suppress the staff shadows on the other side. Amid the chaotic light, the foot of the one-eyed giant suddenly flared with yellow radiance. It let out a loud shout, and the ground beneath its feet immediately shook violently. Crystal sand surged upward in great waves and instantly transformed into a curtain of sand several hundred jang tall that shot straight into the sky. The sky-filling halberd shadows were struck by the sand curtain and immediately scattered. The centaur beast, caught unprepared, was also cut off by the sand curtain. Seeing this, the one-eyed giant hurriedly fled. Immediately afterward, the sand curtain radiated brilliant yellow light and became extremely solid. The three heads of the centaur beast showed disdain. Then, the left head tilted slightly and looked toward a certain direction, its eyes flickering with dual-colored blue-green radiance. Where its gaze intersected the void, intense vibrations instantly arose. Threads of lightning appeared out of thin air. Countless wind blades condensed together, and they rapidly converged into a large, dual-colored lightning sphere, 7 to 8 jang in size. The lightning sphere flickered once, then suddenly struck the yellow sand curtain. Upon contact, the sand curtain tilted backward, yet it did not collapse and still blocked the attack. However, at this moment, the lightning sphere erupted with dazzling radiance and exploded with a heaven-shaking roar. Strands of blue lightning shot straight through like small true flood dragons, carrying sharp wind blades as they spread wildly in all directions, blasting a large hole more than 10 jang wide through the sand curtain. In an instant, the centaur beast flickered and passed through the sand curtain, giving chase at extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, it had rushed several hundred jang forward, but in the next moment, it froze. On the flat ground ahead, there was no trace of the one-eyed giant at all. At that very moment, however, the hazy crystal sand behind it suddenly surged like a blazing sun, erupting with dazzling light. The one-eyed giant appeared along with it. Its aura was somewhat weakened, and its ugly face revealed ferocity. It had not fled at all, but had instead concealed its aura and hidden behind the sand curtain, luring the opponent into pursuit. What was now glowing was the murky eye on its head. The centaur beast immediately sensed that something was wrong and turned around at once, hurling a lightning halberd toward the giant. Almost simultaneously, the giant's single eye flashed, and a white beam shot out. The lightning halberd vanished the instant it touched the white light. 3 breaths later, it abruptly appeared in front of the one-eyed giant and pierced straight through its chest. Countless arcs of lightning burst out along the bloody hole and shot backward. Almost at the same time, the white light struck the centaur beast's body, as if wrapping it in some strange force, rendering it completely immobile. The circulation of magical power within its body suddenly slowed by more than 100-fold. The centaur beast could not help but feel alarmed. It desperately urged all the magical power in its body, trying to break free of the bizarre restraint. Unfortunately, this disturbance looked weak yet was extremely strange. Even with its abyss-deep magical power, it was unable to break through. At this very moment, the void behind it suddenly stirred. A golden-haired giant ape leaped out from nowhere. Both of its hands radiated dazzling light as they struck toward the 2 heads of the centaur at lightning speed. The centaur beast was shocked, and its remaining 2 heads shrank back as if trying to evade. At the same time, the gale surrounding its body suddenly separated, transforming into a deep green wind dragon that looked lifelike, with a sharp horn growing from its head as it attacked the golden-haired giant ape. Unexpectedly, the giant ape showed no intention of dodging. A faint, silvery layer rose over its body, and both fists slammed down with a roar. 2 loud explosions rang out. Because the centaur beast's movements had slowed too much, it could not dodge in time. Its left and right heads were struck by the fists, and instantly shattered, fresh blood mixed with white brain matter splattering everywhere. At this moment, the green wind dragon had already pounced in front of the giant ape. The sharp horn on its head shone brightly, countless green talismans appearing. With a shuck, the faint silver layer was pierced through. A long gash was immediately torn open across the giant ape's chest, and fresh blood gushed out. The giant ape let out a muffled groan of pain. One hand guarded its chest while the other grabbed toward the centaur's remaining head. The centaur beast revealed a look of terror. Its 2 eyes flashed with black light, and countless talismans appeared, swirling around its body. A bizarre scene unfolded. Its body flickered and suddenly vanished on the spot. The giant ape's grab missed. Without the slightest delay, it spread out its divine sense, while blue light appeared in its eyes as it inspected the surroundings. Yet even with the combined use of the Ming-Ching spirit eyes and divine sense, it still could not find any trace of the centaur beast, as if it had truly vanished. Taking advantage of the moment, the green wind dragon coiled around the giant ape's body, leaving several more wounds on it. The golden-haired giant ape wildly swung its arms to protect its vital areas. Blue light flickered in its eyes. Its brow split open, black chi surged out, transforming into a pitch-black demonic eye, the Destruction Dharma Eye. The Ming-Ching Spirit Eyes and the Destruction Dharma Eye shone simultaneously, shooting out 3 streams of spiritual light, 2 blue and 1 black. The 3 merged into one, transforming in midair into a blue-black light sphere the size of a fist, crystal clear and somewhat strange. The golden-haired giant ape opened its mouth and spat out a stream of azure radiance. Immediately, the azure radiance flashed and entered the blue-black light sphere, causing the spiritual light on its surface to blaze forth as countless blue-black talismans rotated across it. With a humming sound, rays of blue-black light sprayed out in all directions from the sphere. In an instant, they wove together into a gigantic blue-black net that covered an area of several li. This was a divine ability Han Li had once accidentally comprehended, combining the Ming-Ching Spirit Eyes with the Destruction Dharma Eye. However, when using this divine ability, the magical power in his body was almost completely drained in an instant. At one spot on the newly formed blue-black net, it suddenly rippled, as if colliding with something. The giant ape's body shook, transforming into a streak of golden light that ignored the green wind dragon and shot toward that spot like lightning. The green wind dragon let out an enraged roar and chased closely after the giant ape. The giant ape moved like the wind and appeared at the abnormal spot on the net in the blink of an eye. Without waiting for the wind dragon to catch up, a golden, radiant palm slammed down viciously toward the object, struggling to escape within the void. A huge explosion sounded as violent shockwaves erupted. A layer of black talismans appeared and then scattered. A massive figure stumbled out. It was the centaur beast. Extreme fear was written across its remaining head. Before it could react, another fur-covered giant fist wreathed in golden light smashed down. Though the centaur beast's movements were still sluggish, it hurriedly crossed both arms to protect its head. At this moment, however, a cold snort came from the giant ape's mouth. The beast felt as if a sharp awl had violently pierced its head. It let out a miserable scream, and its movements instantly froze. The golden fist passed through the gap between its arms and struck its remaining head. Boom! The final head of the beast exploded like a watermelon, and its enormous body convulsed and collapsed to the ground. The green wind dragon barely managed to catch up to the giant ape and tried to drive its sharp horn into the opponent's heart, but it only managed to let out a single cry before its body broke apart into pieces and scattered. Whoosh! A bluish shadow shot out from the headless beast's body. The eyes of the giant ape transformed by Han Li flashed, and he let out a soft cry. The shadow was wrapped in a green whirlwind and looked exactly like the three-headed centaur beast. It had already condensed into a solid form, rather than being a soul, seemingly similar to a cultivator's nascent soul. One head of the centaur beast's true body flashed with black light. The black light around it also blazed brightly, swiftly dragging the afterimage as it plunged into the void and vanished. The giant ape let out a low shout. Black light flashed between its brows, forming the Destruction Dharma eye. The eye trembled slightly and shot out an extremely thin black thread that plunged straight into the void. More than 100 jang away, the void trembled. The centaur beast's true body staggered into view, all three faces filled with shock. Suddenly, silver light flashed all around. Strands of silver fire chains appeared everywhere, instantly forming a huge net of silver flames that descended from above and rapidly tightened. To the left of the centaur beast's true body, green light flashed. The green wind around its body spun rapidly, transforming into a green vortex that protected the body within, preventing the silver fire net from closing immediately. However, the giant ape stepped forward, shattering space. As its arm swung, a sound like ice breaking rang out. A lightning-fast punch struck the green vortex. With a loud boom, the space-shattering fist surged forward. In an instant, the green vortex was shattered as easily as overturning one's hand. The centaur beast's true body only managed to let out a final shrill scream before it was crushed with a dull thud like an egg being smashed. At this moment, the golden-haired giant ape was drenched in blood, more than half of its body stained red. However, its figure suddenly shook and did not pause in the slightest, instead charging straight toward the one-eyed giant lying on the ground not far away. Having been pierced through by the centaur beast's lightning spear, the giant's heart area was gravely injured. Even so, its vitality was extremely tenacious, and it had struggled until now without perishing. At this moment, the bloody hole in its chest was covered by a layer of yellow crystal sand. Its aura was extremely weak, and even the slightest movement seemed difficult. When it saw the golden-haired giant ape pouncing over, extreme terror appeared on the giant's face. It let out a loud shout as a large amount of yellow crystal sand rapidly gathered from all directions, forming a crude boat that barely lifted its body and carried it away. At the same time, the eye on its forehead lit up with white radiance. With a whoosh, a beam of white light shot out, aimed straight at the head of the golden-haired giant ape. The giant ape transformed by Han Li twisted its body slightly. Although he did not know what kind of attack the white light was, recalling the earlier state of the centaur beast after being struck by it, he knew very well that he absolutely could not allow himself to be touched by it. While weighing his options, golden light flashed over his body. His figure suddenly shrank rapidly, reverting back to human form. The giant curled its lips slightly. White light flickered in its eye. The beam of white light trembled like a living thing, changed direction, and continued shooting toward Han Li at an astonishing speed. Panic surged in Han Li's heart. He wanted to dodge swiftly, but it was already too late. Just as the light was about to strike him, a sudden flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. He reached out, tore the green heaven vial from his neck, and hurled it toward the oncoming white beam. An unexpected scene occurred. The moment the white light touched the green heaven vial, it flashed and plunged into it like a clay ox sinking into the sea. The surface of the small vial showed no reaction at all. Seeing this, Han Li's lips twitched slightly, then joy appeared on his face. With a casual wave of his hand, he retrieved the small vial, but did not examine it, instead continuing to charge toward the giant. At this moment, the giant's single eye was wide open, completely unable to believe what had just happened. However, it quickly regained its composure and urged the remaining magical power in its body into the yellow crystal sand boat. The boat emitted brilliant golden light, its speed surged, and it flew rapidly into the distance. While in pursuit, Han Li once again transformed into the golden-haired giant ape and let out a ferocious roar. The roar shook heaven and earth. Immediately, a vast expanse of misty white air surged out like rippling waves. Wherever the ripples passed, the void twisted and deformed. In an instant, the ripples covered several hundred jang ahead. At such a distance, the sonic waves naturally could not inflict much damage on the thick-skinned, tough-bodied giant, but the bone springs beneath its body could not withstand them and shattered violently. The giant immediately lost its balance and fell from the air. At this moment, golden light flashed. The golden-haired giant ape flew over and suddenly threw a straight punch, smashing directly into the giant's head from above. Boom! The giant's head exploded into a mass of red and white fragments that splattered everywhere. Whoosh! A somewhat dim golden light shot out from its body. It was the one-eyed giant's nascent soul. In the direction it appeared, silver light flashed overhead. A net of silver flames descended from above, enveloping the nascent soul within and tightening fiercely. Countless silver talismans shot out and engraved themselves onto the nascent soul's body. In an instant, they formed a silver seal, rendering the nascent soul unable to move as it hovered in midair. All of these actions occurred at lightning speed, so fast that the giant's nascent soul had no chance to use any means before falling into the trap. It had not expected that Han Li, wary of repeating the earlier situation, had already released the Stellar Flame Firebird in advance, waiting only for it to walk into the net. The giant's corpse fell to the ground, the spiritual patterns across its body dimming. Afterward, its enormous form turned rock-like. With a series of crisp cracking sounds, it transformed into countless extremely fine grains of yellow crystal sand. Only its murky eye remained, rolling on the ground, not far away. A streak of azure light slowly descended. It was Han Li, who had returned to human form. At this moment, he was looking down at the green vial in his hand, his gaze uncertain, as if thinking about something. After a long while, he raised his head and waved his hand forward. The gray eye was immediately drawn over by a suction force and fell into his hand. Now, it looked like an ordinary stone bead, with no aura at all. However, since it had been able to emit a beam containing the power of time laws, it was clearly no ordinary object. A thought stirred in Han Li's mind. Acting on impulse, he brought the eye and lightly tapped it against the green heaven vial. With a crisp clang, nothing unusual happened to either the eye or the vial. Seeing this, he shook his head and smiled. At this moment, he had no intention of doing anything further. He hung the green vial back around his neck and secured it, then casually took out a green jade box. With great care, he placed the eye inside, then put it away. At this time, the flame sealing the giant's nascent soul, which possessed great spiritual intelligence, flew over to him. Han Li raised his head and looked at the giant's nascent soul, a hint of contemplation appearing on his face. This being had cultivation at the Great Ascension stage and was comparable to a true immortal level monster, so for the moment he could not determine what use its nascent soul might have. However, he was certain that even in the immortal realm, it would be an extremely precious item. That said, he did not have time to concern himself with this matter right now. His sleeve flicked, and several talismans were immediately affixed around the giant's nascent soul. Only then did he recall the Stellar Flame Firebird and place the nascent soul into a wooden box before putting it away. Afterward, he went to the corpse of the centaur beast, several hundred jang away, and as before, collected its storage pouch. Only after finishing all of this did he let out a long sigh. This fierce battle had exhausted him considerably. Fortunately, there had been danger, but no calamity. Although he had suffered quite a few injuries, they were nothing to worry about. He swept his gaze around and discovered that after the battle, the small island had become desolate. Countless trees were broken everywhere, and the land was uneven and littered with debris. Only a few distant areas, unaffected by the battle, had barely retained their original appearance. Han Li slightly narrowed his eyes and released his divine sense to cover the entire continental area. In an instant, after a brief moment, his brows furrowed, and a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. He stood in place and thought for a while. Then his figure moved lightly as he swept toward the depths of the forest. The forest was silent, and many ancient trees were lush and verdant. Han Li went straight through the woods. With his breadth of knowledge and experience, a feeling he had never had before rose in his heart, filled with astonishment. Within his sight grew many strange flowers and unusual herbs. There were even some types which, in the spirit realm, would count as supreme-grade spiritual materials that were rarely seen in 100 years. Yet here, they could be found everywhere. Not only that, most were not young plants. The majority were already over 1,000 years old, and there were even a few that were tens of thousands of years old or more. In addition, there were some spiritual medicines he did not recognize, but most contained astonishing spiritual power, or had strange scents and appearances. Naturally, he was not polite at all, and the desire to claim them arose within him. Although he had already swept this mysterious bubble space once with his divine sense when he first entered, seeing it with his own eyes still made him marvel in awe. He secretly thought that he was truly fortunate that he had not hurriedly left earlier. About half an hour later, Han Li's figure stopped in a relatively open area within the forest. Here, the trees were sparse, and no spiritual medicines grew, making the place look somewhat desolate. More than 100 jang in front of him was an enormous cave over 100 jang wide, like a gigantic sack. The cave entrance was pitch black. Han Li stood there and surveyed the surroundings. Only after confirming there were no abnormalities did he walk up to the cave and look inside. This cave did not drop straight down. Instead, it slanted diagonally into the earth, extending downward. From within came an unceasing woo-woo wind sound. Blue light flickered in Han Li's eyes as he quickly swept into the cave. Inside, It was faintly damp. From the ceiling and both rock walls came the sound of dripping water. Even stepping on the ground felt slick. About a quarter of an hour after entering the cave, the tunnel suddenly turned and sloped further downward. Moreover, the surrounding walls of rock began to show interspersed blocks of crystal that emitted a cold white light. At first they were sparse, but as he went deeper, the crystals became increasingly dense, gradually illuminating the entire passage. After another quarter of an hour, he finally reached the end of the cave. Ahead, an opening led down into a vast area spanning several hundred zhang. On the ceiling above the opening were countless crystals that emitted a chilly white radiance, lighting up the space. At the bottom, he could hear the gentle sound of running water. An underground stream flowed through here, pooling into a small lake. Around the lake was a sandy ground formed from yellow crystal sand. The white light mixed with the ripples on the lake surface caused shimmering waves of light to dance across the cave walls, creating a strangely beautiful feeling. At this moment, Han Li had no mind to appreciate the scenery. His gaze remained fixed on the center of the basin, an enormous rock rising above the lake surface. The flat top of the rock was over 30 zhang wide, and growing from it was a strange tree about 10 zhang tall. The trunk resembled a peach tree from the mortal world, but it was completely bare, without a single leaf. However, peach-like fruits grew from its branches. Han Li leaped down near the base of the tree and began to inspect it carefully. He discovered that mysterious patterns, unlike anything he had ever seen, were distributed across the surface of the trunk. They were not carved on, but looked as if they had naturally formed. The fruits were even stranger. Their surfaces were densely covered with twisting lines that formed shapes resembling grotesque human faces. Some looked like the face of an old man over 80, some like a newborn infant, and others like a middle-aged woman. None of the faces were the same. Yet regardless of the patterns, all of the human-like faces on the surface of the fruits emitted astonishingly powerful Earth aspect primordial chi without exception. Earlier, it was precisely because he had discovered this primordial chi that he had been drawn here. Han Li stroked his chin, as if thinking of something, and a vague conjecture formed in his heart. This mysterious bubble space had originally belonged to the one-eyed giant, and the centaur beast had been willing to risk its life to fight a battle to the death precisely because of this strange peach tree. Although he could not identify the origin of this tree or the peaches, he could be certain of one thing. Anything that could make two monsters with strength comparable to true immortals fight was absolutely not ordinary. It had to be some kind of unknown heaven and earth spirit treasure. But this was no longer the important point. Right now, everything here belonged to him alone. The immortal realm. In the sky above an unknown mountain range, black clouds blanketed the heavens. Gale force winds howled as snow continued to fall, whipping through the air and filling the sky. Heaven and earth were dark and hazy. The mountain range held more than 10 peaks. Below the slopes, sparse trees could still be seen, buried beneath thick layers of snow, a vast expanse of white, completely frozen over. Between heaven and earth, aside from the furious howl of the gale and the sound of snow falling to the ground, there was no other movement, nor any sign of living things. However, at this moment, from within the deep interior of the tallest snow peak, a sharp woman's voice pierced through layer upon layer of snow, unaffected by the raging wind as it rang out clearly. Who is it? Who dares with such boldness to kill my spirit pet? No matter who you are, I will find you, hack you into 10,000 pieces, and tear out your soul to suppress it beneath this mountain so you will never reincarnate. The voice, filled with rage, shook even the gale, making the interior of the snow peak tremble. Countless massive blocks of snow, accumulated over who knows how many years, cracked apart from the sheer cliff face and came crashing down. They swept along boundless snowdrifts as they thundered down the mountainside, producing booming, thump-thump sounds like war drums. In a deep blue sea region of the northern cold immortal domain, a circular glow like sunlight spread across the vast sky after rain. The heavens were clear, with wisps of white clouds drifting lazily. A gentle breeze blew across the sea surface as waves rose and fell softly, the sound of surf murmuring without end. At the junction with the sea lay a black island spanning several thousand li, clung to by countless strangely shaped black reefs. Their forms were irregular, yet when viewed from above, the cluster of reefs resembled an enormous tree canopy. At a harbor on the northern side of the island, numerous fleets were anchored at this moment. Yet the shore itself was deserted, with not a single person in sight. From the harbor into the island stretched a broad, bluestone road that led straight into a dense forest. At the end of the road stood a village of ancient-style buildings faintly visible among towering old trees that seemed to blot out the sky. At this moment, flames flared up throughout the village, thick smoke billowing everywhere. Earth-shaking shouts rang out incessantly from all directions. The glow of magical treasures filled the air, heavy with the stench of blood. Amid the chaotic, devastated, and desolate scene, nearly 1,000 cultivators were locked in a frenzied melee, vaguely divided into two factions. At a glance, their numbers appeared roughly equal. One side's cultivators were clearly not of the human race. Each was tall in stature, with fangs and green skin. Most wielded spiked maces as their magical weapons, and a layer of white radiance enveloped their bodies. Among them were also some alien cultivators clad in golden armor, like towering warriors with wolf fangs, wielding large maces. Their entire bodies were golden like wax, looking unlike living beings, more like wax statues. The cultivators on the opposing side were mostly human. Among them were some soldiers clad in strange blood-red armor. These blood-armored soldiers had skin the same color as their armor, with plain, honest features. When they fought, they showed no expression at all, appearing like puppets. At one elevated point, a blood-armored soldier wielding a blood-red spear leaped down, charged forward wildly, and thrust his spear fiercely into a wax-golden warrior. As the spear tip struck, a blood-colored vortex suddenly burst open, countless sprays of blood shooting outward. With a loud boom, the wax-golden warrior's chest exploded into a huge hole like a vat, thick yellow liquid pouring out endlessly. His body staggered back several steps, but the next instant his legs bent slightly and he sprang up with lightning speed. His arms suddenly swung the spiked mace, countless club shadows appearing and transforming into a massive golden tornado that swept straight toward the blood-armored soldier. Bang! Caught off guard, the blood-armored soldier's head instantly exploded. Yet in the final moment, the spear in his hand was hurled with all his strength, turning into a streak of bloodlight that pierced directly through the wax-golden warrior's head. The two fell almost simultaneously, one dissolving into a pool of thin blood, the other instantly turning into a puddle of molten wax. Elsewhere, atop a city wall, a strange flicker appeared as the figure of a plump old man emerged, holding a blood-colored jade bottle. He inverted the bottle's mouth toward a point more than 10 jang away, where a soldier was locked in combat with an alien cultivator. The old man lightly patted the bottom of the bottle. Bloodlight flashed at the mouth as dense threads of blood sprayed out, interweaving into a silent, blood-red pillar of light that shot straight toward the alien's back. A bizarre scene followed. As soon as the blood-red pillar touched the layer of white radiance outside the alien's body, it paused slightly. Though not completely nullified, its power seemed to drop by 3/10 in an instant. Thud! The alien staggered and was knocked down, blood spraying wildly from its mouth. Yet it seemed not to even register the pain. Instead, it spun around in fury and charged straight toward the old man. Similar scenes occurred from time to time throughout the village. Whether wax-golden warriors or blood-armored soldiers, all fought with extraordinary ferocity, utterly fearless, their momentum as if willing to perish together. However, since their numbers and strength were closely matched, no clear victor could be decided. Because the alien cultivators were protected by that strange white radiance, the power of any magical treasure or spell that struck them was reduced by 3/10. On the battlefield, they quickly gained the upper hand, forcing the human cultivators to retreat continuously and gradually converge toward the center of the village. At the same time, on a white stone plaza at the village's center, more than a dozen figures in black cloaks silently surrounded a colossal statue, seated cross-legged, murmuring strange, ancient incantations. These people included men and women, young and old alike, all with pallid complexions. One by one, they rolled up their sleeves, extending their forearms. As each flicked their wrist, a thin stream of blood flowed out. Drop after drop of red blood fell onto the ground before them. The ground was carved with half-finger-deep grooves that connected with one another, forming a rather complex formation pattern that linked this spot to the statue. The statue stood about 10 zhang tall, carved in the likeness of a young scholar wearing a kerchief, holding a book, his gaze directed toward the distance. If Han Li were here, he would be greatly astonished, for the statue's features closely resembled his, only the proportions differed slightly, with Han Li himself being somewhat taller. Before the statue, a white-haired old man in a grayish-blood robe clasped his arms around his shoulders, his face filled with reverence as he pleaded toward the statue. "Great ancestral god, please heed the summons of your loyal bloodline. We beseech you to descend." The grooves on the ground around the statue were already filled with fresh blood, all of it converging like small streams beneath the statue. As the white-haired old man's trembling voice echoed, the faint bloodlight on the statue's surface swelled and receded. At the hem of the robe hanging down, a blood-red vortex spun continuously, emitting waves of strange sound. With a buzzing hum, light flashed within the blood-red vortex, and a blood-armored soldier appeared. His dull eyes swept around briefly before his figure shot upward, flying straight to the battlefield beyond the plaza. Shortly after, light flashed again within the vortex. Another blood-armored soldier emerged, and likewise joined the slaughter outside. Just then, a black-cloaked girl sitting cross-legged nearby suddenly swayed and toppled over. Her face was pale as paper, even her lips completely drained of color. Yet from the cut at her wrist, not a single drop of blood flowed. Seeing this, the white-haired old man showed a trace of reluctance, but he could only wave his hand. Among the dozen attendants, a cloth-clad strong man immediately stepped forward, carried the girl away, and fed her a red pill. At the vacant spot she left, a young girl, not very old, quickly stepped in to replace her. She looked timid, yet did not hesitate in the slightest. Kneeling down like the others, she rolled up her left sleeve, drew a gleaming small knife, and pressed it to her wrist. With eyes tightly shut in fear, she bit her lip and cut down. A striking thread of blood immediately appeared, and a stream of dark red blood flowed like ox's blood onto the altar. Although this place operated at full capacity, producing blood-armored soldiers at intervals to join the battle, it still could not halt the human race's trend toward defeat. Not long after, the sounds of shouting and screaming drew ever closer. On the plaza, everyone's expressions became extremely grim, and despair gradually surfaced in their eyes. This sacrificial plaza, with the statue of the young man at its center, housed the formation passed down within this tribe. Once the alien race breached it and destroyed the ancestral god statue, it would mean the annihilation of the entire clan. At this moment, more and more human cultivators were forced back by the alien race from all directions to the edge of the plaza, forming a defensive ring and about to fall into a desperate last stand. From high above, deafening explosions rang out without cease. Several clusters of red light collided violently, revealing more than 10 figures. Among them, 6 were green-skinned aliens with ferocious appearances, their eyes filled with frenzied battle intent. Their fangs gleamed with a cold, bone-piercing light. The green-skinned aliens were already tall by nature, yet the purple-robed man leading them stood 2 heads taller than his kin, resembling a towering iron pagoda suspended in midair. The aura around him was extremely formidable, clearly marking him as a great ascension cultivator. The 5 aliens following behind him all possessed mid to late fusion stage cultivation. Their bodies were also covered in white radiance, far more pronounced than that of ordinary aliens. Not far away stood 5 human cultivators. Aside from a refined but slightly plump man in blue robes at the late fusion stage, the others were merely at the early fusion stage, and clearly no match for their opponents. With the crisis of annihilation closing in, the refined man felt an unspeakable bitterness in his heart. He could only glance at the gigantic statue on the plaza and grit his teeth inwardly. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A brilliant mass of white light suddenly appeared before the refined man's group like blazing sunlight and exploded with a thunderous roar. Countless beams of light shot out at once. Boom, boom, boom. An incomparably powerful shockwave spread outward from the center of the explosion, instantly forming violent tornadoes that swept in all directions. Several indistinct figures were flung out of the white light and crashed down toward the plaza. With a massive boom, the ground along the plaza cracked apart and sank, forming a huge pit more than 10 zhang deep. Very quickly, several streaks of red light flew out from the pit, revealing the figures of the human cultivators. At this moment, all of their clothes were torn and tattered, their auras in complete disarray. The refined man's face was sallow like yellowed paper. In his hand, he gripped a blood-patterned shield that had been badly damaged, while fresh blood continuously flowed from the corner of his mouth. Just now, it had been his all-out effort that ensured everyone's safety. No one had died, but he himself had paid a heavy price. Seeing this, the surrounding human clan leaders were greatly alarmed and cried out in unison. The refined man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his sleeve and waved his hand toward them, signaling that he was fine. He then raised his head and looked into the sky. Seeing that the alien cultivators had not immediately given chase, he walked toward the statue and looked questioningly at the white-haired old man. The old man shook his head, his expression sorrowful, and said that the ancestral god still had not responded. The refined man let out a bitter laugh and murmured, "Ancestral god, could it be that you truly intend to abandon your people, to abandon your servants?" At this moment, the purple-robed alien led his kin as they descended into the plaza. Hovering in the air, he laughed loudly and said, "Luo Feng, even now you still pray to that useless so-called ancestral god? Why not switch to worshipping the ancestral god of our Hengxing clan instead?" Luo Feng shouted angrily, "Don't speak nonsense! Back then, your ancestral god was nothing more than a defeated foe of our Wumeng Island's ancestral god." The purple-robed alien chuckled coldly. "What does a momentary humiliation from the past matter? That is simply the rule of winners and losers. Our ancestral god still protects our clan to this day without a single misfortune. Unlike yours, tell me, has your ancestral god ever awakened since being gravely injured and falling into slumber 10,000 years ago? I fear he has long since perished." As he spoke, the purple-robed alien Donghua gestured at the white radiance on his own body, then glanced disdainfully at the statue below. Hearing this, Luo Feng fell silent. He wanted to refute it, but could not. because what the other party said was not without reason. For nearly 10,000 years, the ancestral god of his clan had indeed remained in a state of deep slumber, with almost no contact with the clansmen. Especially in the past 1,000 years, there had been no response whatsoever to their calls. This time, when the great enemy began its invasion, they had relied on the clansmen's essence blood to attempt to awaken the ancestral god. But to this day, there had still been no reply. Although they could use the statue left behind by the ancestral god to summon some guardian soldiers, they were like grains of sand in a desert, barely able to delay things a little, but utterly incapable of changing the overall situation. Donghua continued, Luo Feng, relying solely on summoning these blood-armored soldiers to stop our clan is nothing but wishful thinking. If you do not surrender obediently, I will slaughter your entire clan. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand. The offensive of the surrounding Hang Seng clan instantly intensified several-fold. The Wuming Island side was already at a disadvantage, and now the danger deepened further. Several defensive lines were breached, and the enemy could be seen on the verge of storming into the plaza. Luo Feng's body trembled, his face turning ashen, despair rising in his heart. At this very moment, a low woo-woo sound of unknown origin suddenly echoed through the air. The azure statue abruptly shook, emitting a rumbling sound, then burst forth with dazzling black light that grew brighter and brighter. It's the ancestral god. The ancestral god has manifested. The white-haired old man nearest the altar was the first to notice the change and cried out in great joy. The people of Wuming Island were first stunned, then, upon hearing the old man's words, erupted into wild joy. Their morale soared. The defensive line that was about to collapse showed signs of stabilizing once more. The Hang Seng clan's reaction was the complete opposite unease filled their hearts. If the opposing ancestral god truly manifested, then even their great Ascension clan leader would be no match. Clan leader Donghua stared fixedly at the statue below, shouting in disbelief. The light radiating from the statue grew ever more intense, then suddenly flashed. With a thunderous crash, the entire statue shattered, transforming into a vast expanse of pitch-black radiance. The black light flickered several times and then formed a massive black vortex dozens of zhong wide. Within the vortex, streaks of jet-black lightning arced violently, tearing through the void and releasing ear-splitting thunder. Although the sky had been clear, the appearance of the black vortex brought with it faint dark clouds, within which lightning also flashed. The heaven and earth spiritual chi within several hundred li boiled like water, churning violently. Witnessing this scene, the expressions of both sides changed drastically. Fear arose in their hearts, and they hurriedly ceased fighting. Within the vortex, the black lightning arcs rapidly increased, then gathered together and condensed into a massive, trembling black lightning sphere. With sizzling sounds, the black lightning sphere suddenly twisted, then stretched out and transformed into a pitch-black spatial rift more than 10 jang long. Whoosh! A somewhat unsteady figure shot out from within, then stabilized in midair. A man in blue robes appeared. The spatial rift flashed several times before slowly closing and disappearing. In the next moment, the black vortex also gradually dissipated. The violently surging spiritual chi quickly calmed, and the dark clouds in the sky vanished as well. The man in blue robes looked somewhat disheveled, but his expression showed clear delight. After stabilizing his body, he looked down at the surroundings below. Seeing a crowd being besieged on all sides, he frowned slightly. This person was none other than Han Li. He had exhausted all means at his disposal and finally succeeded in passing through the gap between the realms. However, at this moment, the magical power within his body was almost completely depleted, and his physical strength had been severely drained as well. The 8-treasure exquisite bone armor had been completely destroyed within the spatial tempest. But what exactly was this scene unfolding before his eyes? Ancestral God, you finally returned! Clan leader Luo Feng quickly sized up the man in blue robes. A trace of something unusual flickered through his eyes in an instant, and then wild joy burst across his face. He dropped to his knees before Han Li and bowed deeply. Ancestral God! Ancestral God! The residents of Wuming Island, especially the younger ones, saw their clan leader's reaction and immediately cried with joy, shouting at the top of their lungs. They then retreated and knelt down to pay their respects to Han Li. However, the older clansmen and the elders wore strange expressions, as if hesitating, standing there in a daze. Why aren't you paying respects to the ancestral god? Luo Feng glared at those elders, then barked in a deep voice. Paying respects to the ancestral god? The group jolted, hurriedly bent down in salute, and called out, Ancestral god! Han Li appeared calm, but his heart stirred slightly. In the blink of an eye, with his knowledge and experience, he could naturally see the situation clearly. At this moment, the human side, led by that refined man, was being besieged by the alien race, led by the purple-robed strongman. The human situation was indeed poor, even nearly at the point of defeat. He had not expected that after struggling to return to the immortal realm, he would run straight into such a scene. If not for the fact that there was only a single Great Ascension cultivator here, and within 1,000 Li there seemed to be no existence capable of threatening him, Han Li would have left without hesitation. After all, the blood-soaked struggle here had nothing to do with him. In midair, not far away, Donghua's expression turned uncertain when he saw Han Li appear out of nowhere. He had been on the verge of wiping out the remaining humans on Wuming Island, yet at the last moment, a sudden variable had emerged. "Clan leader, what do we do? Should we ask for instructions?" A catfish-mustached man at the fusion stage transmitted anxiously. Donghua had forced those humans to this point with great difficulty. He absolutely could not stop halfway. He clenched his teeth and transmitted back. "Pass the order down. Fight to the death." "But if that person really is Wuming Island's ancestral god," the catfish-mustached man said worriedly. Donghua snorted coldly. "This man's appearance is somewhat strange. He looks rather young. Whether he truly is Wuming Island's ancestral god is still unknown. I can see his aura is weak, and his injuries must be severe. He can't pose any real threat. We strike together and kill that brat." "Wuming Island is finished." Donghua seemed to have made up his mind, transmitting in a cold voice. After speaking, he immediately rose higher into the air and watched Han Li with icy eyes. The catfish-mustached man and 3 other fusion-stage alien cultivators followed at once. Encircling Han Li now clasped both hands behind his back and faced Donghua unhurriedly, without revealing the slightest abnormality. Neither side made any further move yet, but the Hangsing clan members were already shouting loudly and launched another assault. Wuming Island immediately resisted. However, Han Li's appearance caused their morale to rise noticeably. Luo Feng swept his gaze around, then hesitated as if about to say something to Han Li, but Donghua suddenly struck first. A vast expanse of blue light surged around Donghua's body. Behind him appeared the phantom of an enormous blue python, as large as a mountain, with a curved horn on its head. The one-horned giant python had only just taken shape when it opened its mouth and lunged fiercely at Han Li. A wave of blue cold spread out, accompanied by repeated crack-crack sounds as layers of icy frost extended in all directions, making the air seem to freeze solid. At the same time, Donghua raked his claws through the void. Countless bands of radiance swirled and in a flash transformed into 2 blue short spears that shot out. Carrying vast blue icy mist, they turned into a pair of ice dragons, dozens of Zhonglong, one from the left and one from the right, charging toward Han Li. Almost the instant Donghua attacked, the 4 fusion-stage alien cultivators also simultaneously urged their magical treasures and attacked Han Li. Han Li calmly raised a hand and struck out a palm toward the blue ripples. Boom! A terrifying force turned into layers of shockwaves that collided head-on with the blue ripples. With a series of crisp, bang-bang sounds, the blue ripples were easily shattered and quickly vanished. At this moment, a bone-chilling ambush arrived. It was the 2 ice dragons from the left and right. Han Li did not change expression in the slightest. With his other hand, he swept outward. The void rippled in layers, as if a giant invisible hand had slapped through it. 2 crack-crack sounds rang out as the pair of ice dragons let out loud roars and instantly shattered, returning to their original forms. The 2 blue short spears were caught by Han Li and held firmly in his hand. Seeing this, Donghua's face turned deathly pale. His eyes filled with disbelief. We'll end this episode here. Everyone, remember to hit like and subscribe to keep watching the next parts.